From falling in love to getting married, 9 years have passed. I never thought my husband would betray me, but I was proven wrong. My husband cheated with his assistant, repeatedly choosing her over me and our baby. I hate him. He's the reason we lost our baby. In the 5th year of our marriage, he cheated. I accidentally stumbled upon explicit photos from his assistant, Claire. In the photos, her cleavage was partially exposed, with ambiguous red marks on her collarbones. New nightgown, how do I look in it? Last time you were too rough, the marks haven't faded yet. From falling in love to getting married, 9 years have passed, and I never imagined Glenn would betray me. This must be the WeChat account he specifically registered. Only one friend, Claire. My hands trembled as I continued to scroll through their chat history. For the past 3 months, they exchanged good morning and good night messages almost every day. She sweetly called him husband. He affectionately referred to her as baby. Baby. He hasn't called me that in a long time. He said, "We're an old married couple who acts so lovey-dovey anymore." So, being with Claire doesn't feel too lovey-dovey? The more records I read, the more intense the pain in my heart became. Tears uncontrollably streamed down my face. I remembered last Saturday, our wedding anniversary. I waited from evening until 11 o'clock at night. All the food had gone cold by the time he returned. When he saw the cake, his expression froze. With that one look, I knew he had forgotten our anniversary. It's false to say I wasn't heartbroken. But he held me and explained. He had been working overtime a lot lately, which led to the accidental forgetfulness. I only cared about how tired he was. I couldn't bring myself to be angry. But in reality, that night, Claire had a fever, and he was taking care of her. Even with a temperature of 38 degrees, they still had an affair. At midnight, I saw the message Claire sent. "We worked up a sweat in bed, and the fever has subsided. Honey, you're so amazing." The pain ravaged every cell in my body. It hurt so much I could barely catch my breath. When Glenn came out of the bathroom, tears were streaming down my face. He had a moment of astonishment. His expression changed abruptly when he noticed the phone I was clutching. "Louise." He walked over, wanting to hug me. I pushed him away abruptly. "Don't touch me, you're filthy." Sadness and regret tainted his eyes. "Louise, don't speak to me like this." There was a hint of grievance in his voice. Feeling more absurd, I choked out, "Aren't you dirty too?" His face turned incredibly pale. "I only love you, Louise, you have to believe me." I was just carried away. No one in this world can shake your place in my heart. Carried away? I sarcastically laughed, tears falling more fiercely. On the 16th of last month, when I was hospitalized for appendicitis, where were you? A hint of panic flashed in his eyes. I was on a business trip to the UK, I couldn't make it back in time, you know that. Even at this moment, he still tried to deceive me. I lay in the hospital bed, thinking only of him. While he was with Claire, flying from England to Switzerland for skiing. In the private circle of friends on WeChat, on that day. They even posted a photo of them kissing in the snow. The caption read us. 2 simple words turned into the sharpest knife. Directly piercing my heart. Blurring my flesh and blood, piercing me to the core. Between me and Claire, he repeatedly chose her over me. Now he claims he still loves me, he was just seeking novelty. It's too absurd. I could barely speak through my tears. "Glenn, we've been together for 9 years. Why did you make our love so unbearable?" 9 years. Such a long companionship. In the end, it all came to an end. I filed for divorce. Glenn disagreed. At first, he tried to appease me. But my silence gradually wore down his patience. As I packed my things, preparing to leave, he stopped me at the door, impatiently saying, "I've already been so humble. Why are you still making a scene?" I said I would cut ties with her. "Why are you so stubborn?" A pang in my chest. Tears began to fall again. Choking back, I said, "No matter what you do, it doesn't change the fact that you cheated." He impatiently grabbed his hair, then grabbed my bag and slammed it to the ground. "Divorce, forget about it." With that, he stormed out and slammed the door. I knelt on the floor, silently crying for a long time before grabbing my luggage and moving out. For the next 2 weeks, I didn't see Glenn at all. I never expected Claire to ask me out for coffee. She provocatively said as soon as she opened the door, "Louise, Glenn doesn't love you anymore. He loves me. If you have any sense, stop occupying the position of Glenn's wife." I mockingly asked, "Do all mistresses nowadays flaunt their presence so openly like you?" She didn't care, disdainfully saying, "In matters of love, the one who isn't loved is the mistress. Moreover, do you know what Glenn likes most about me?" My fingers on the table involuntarily clenched. Realizing my tension, she smirked triumphantly. "He says he likes my boldness, passion, and my ability to have fun. Not like you, in bed, you're like a dead fish. It's tasteless." I never imagined Glenn could describe me in such a vile way. In an instant, a wave of humiliation washed over me. I was trembling all over. In a fit of anger and indignation, I slapped Claire across the face. "You really disgust me." Claire, in a rage, "How dare you hit me?" As she tried to lunge at me to hit me, Glenn intervened. He grabbed Claire's wrist, displeased, saying, "Didn't I warn you not to harass Louise?" While speaking, Glenn gave a forceful shake. Claire immediately fell to the ground. She hung her head, stunned for a few seconds. When she lifted her gaze again, her eyes were already red with tears. She tearfully complained, "You promised to protect me forever. She hit me, and you pushed me for her." Glenn's tone was cold. "If you didn't come to bother her, you wouldn't have been hit." Although Glenn was defending me, I clearly noticed. When Claire cried, the tenderness and pity hidden deep in Glenn's eyes. Claire yelled out, "Glenn, I hate you. I don't want anything to do with you anymore." With that, she wiped her tears and walked away. At those words, a hint of panic and helplessness flashed in Glenn's eyes. I could tell he was genuinely afraid that she would ignore him. A sharp pain in my heart, I held back the tears, tauntingly said, "If you can't bear to let her go, then go after her." Glenn's gaze finally returned to me. "Sorry, Louise, I didn't know she would come to bother you. I promise you, this won't happen again in the future." At that moment, someone downstairs suddenly shouted, "Something happened! The girl who ran out crying just now was hit by a motorcycle." Glenn's body suddenly stiffened. The worry and tension in his eyes were clear. In a trembling voice, he said, "Louise, Claire is still my subordinate. She's injured. It's only right and proper for me to go check on her. Wait for me here, we'll talk when I get back." With that, he hurriedly ran out in distress. I hesitated for a moment, then followed. And then, I saw him holding Claire. Claire had injured her right ankle and cried, saying, "Weren't you ignoring me? Why did you follow me?" Glenn sighed. "When will you stop being so reckless? Let me worry about you less. Can you do that?" Though his words sounded like a reprimand, his tone was affectionate. Once again, I clearly realized. He cares about her. It's not just a passing fancy. He really likes her. My heart had a momentary paralysis, followed by an overwhelming sense of grief. Trembling fingers, caressing my abdomen. It's truly absurd. After discovering his affair, I found out I was pregnant. What do I do, baby? Daddy seems to have truly fallen for someone else. He doesn't want us anymore. 9 years. I firmly believed Glenn and I would grow old together. Who would have thought it would end so embarrassingly in the end? That day, I didn't wait for Glenn to come back. Our next meeting was 2 days later. I went to the hospital for a miscarriage procedure, while he accompanied Claire, with her injured right ankle, for a checkup. I gazed at him steadily. My heart couldn't contain the throbbing pain. The next moment, Glenn saw me. He let go of Claire and walked towards me quickly. Claire stood at the staircase, holding onto the railing, glaring at me with resentment. Glenn asked with concern, "Louise, why are you here at the hospital? Are you feeling unwell?" I snorted coldly. "Naturally, you don't have time to care about me." His eyes shifted slightly, and he hurriedly explained to me. "Louise, don't misunderstand. Claire has no one in H City, and she's injured. I'm just showing concern as a boss for my subordinate. Nothing will happen between her and me. You have to trust me." Should I believe him? After finding out about my pregnancy, there was a moment when I almost wanted to give him another chance for the sake of the baby. I truly couldn't bear the thought of parting with this child. Just thinking about having him removed from my body was unbearable. I wanted to keep him. In fact, Glenn also loves children very much. 2 years ago, when we moved to a new house, Glenn intentionally prepared a nursery in the villa. He even bought a bunch of boys' and girls' clothes, toys. At that time, I teased him for being too extravagant. My belly hasn't even shown any signs yet. You've already bought clothes for an 8-year-old. Aren't you afraid of being laughed at? He didn't care. Let them laugh. I spoil my kids, what's it to them? After all, he is the father of the child. Regardless of how things are between Glenn and me, I should let him know about the existence of this child. I was about to speak up and tell Glenn about my pregnancy. Suddenly, Claire at the staircase screamed for help. "Glenn, help me." Both Glenn and I looked over at the same time. We happened to see her falling down the stairs. It was strange, she was standing there just fine. How did she suddenly fall? Glenn's face turned pale in an instant. "Louise, Claire might be in danger. I can't just watch her get hurt." He turned to leave. I grabbed his sleeve, anxiously saying, "Glenn, don't go. Don't you want to know why I'm at the hospital? If you leave now, you'll regret it." In my anxious gaze, he once again left me behind and rushed towards Claire. He said, "Louise, wait for me. Once I make sure Claire is okay, I'll come back for you." Looking at his hurried departure, my heartache was almost suffocating. "Glenn, I won't wait for you anymore." Tears streaming down my face, gently caressing my abdomen. "Baby. Although it's hard to let go, but Mommy has to say goodbye to you. Mommy loves you so much. That's why I can't bear to let you be born into a dysfunctional family. Glenn. I hate you. I really hate you. It's you. It's you who killed our baby. You always say, let me wait a little longer. Fine, I'll wait for the verdict. After I come out of the operating room, how ugly your face will be. After the surgery ended, I sat pale-faced in a chair to rest. Shortly after, I received a call from Glenn. Louise, where are you now? I'll come over right away to be with you. It seems Claire has escaped danger. He finally had time to care about me. With an empty heart, I wearily said. I'm at the entrance of the 6th floor operating room. He urgently asked. What's wrong with you? Is it serious? From his tone, it sounded like he really cared about me. What would his reaction be when he knows the truth? I softly replied. It's not that serious. Just had a miscarriage operation, feeling a bit weak. Suddenly, Glenn seemed to stop breathing. He was silent for a long time before unbelievably asking. Louise, what did you say? I didn't hear clearly. I repeated each word. I said, I just terminated your child. Glenn quickly appeared in front of me. His lips trembled nervously as he said in a shaky voice. Louise, why didn't you tell me you were pregnant? I know you lied to me about getting rid of the baby because you were mad at me. Our baby must still be there, right? Louise, I'm so happy. We finally have a child, I'm going to be a dad. He reached out to pull me. Let's go home. You're pregnant, you need to rest well. You can't run around like before. Seeing his absent-minded, self-deceiving appearance, a hint of pleasure suddenly arose in my heart. I mocked. Glenn, stop acting crazy. While you were just with Claire, your child was gone. Do you understand now? Do I need to repeat myself? At my words, he froze in place. His hand hanging by his side couldn't help but tremble. After a while, his eyes reddened, almost despairing, he questioned me. Louise, why didn't you tell me? That's our child together. What right do you have to decide his life and death without me? Have you considered my feelings? He seemed to be on the verge of collapsing. Glenn, it hurts a lot, doesn't it? You will hurt even more. I continued to stab at his heart. I wanted to tell you. But at that moment, you left me to find Claire, did you forget? You said you couldn't ignore her. I said if you left, you would regret it. But you still left me. Glenn, the culprit is you. You killed our baby. You killed him. Glenn's body suddenly shook. The pain in his eyes became increasingly evident. Finally, he said in deep sorrow. Louise, I'm sorry. I didn't know you were pregnant, I didn't know. Suppressing the bitterness in my chest, I taunted. Of course you didn't know. After all your energy was focused on Claire. He weakly tried to explain. Just now, I was just worried about her safety. I didn't mean to leave you, Louise, I coldly interrupted him. Glenn, stop trying to justify yourself. Is it so hard to admit that you're an indecisive scumbag? He almost choked up, sadly saying. Louise, I only love you. Besides you, I've never loved anyone else. Maybe it's because our life was too mundane. I got tired of the same old days, and that's why I made a mistake. I was wrong, I truly realize it now. I beg you, forgive me this once, please? No. Glenn. I gave you chances. But you didn't appreciate them. I will never turn back again. I brought up divorce with Glenn again. But he still refused to agree. He was terribly stubborn. Despite knowing that everything was irreparable, he still wanted to struggle in vain. In the following days, he went mad trying to win me back. He sent countless pieces of jewelry through his assistant. I returned them all. The office was filled with fresh red roses every day. I had the cleaning lady take them all away. Sometimes, he would wait for me outside the office building after work. And I always ignored him and took a different route. The new intern, unaware of the situation, innocently asked me. Sister Louise, isn't Glenn a top-tier handsome and wealthy man? He's pursuing you so eagerly, are you really not moved at all? I smiled lightly and shook my head. This continued for a month. Seeing that I remained unmoved, Glenn, heartbroken, drank himself into a stupor and collapsed at my doorstep. In the past, seeing him in such a state would have certainly made me feel pity. But now, all I felt was a messy sense of annoyance. I didn't even want to look at him anymore. Turns out, this is how it feels when you don't love someone. He was so drunk, clinging to my leg and refusing to let go. Louise, I can't bear to lose you. Let's not get a divorce, okay? I can't live without you. I was repulsed, and I kicked him away. Glenn, besides divorce, I have nothing to say to you. He fell to the ground from my kick, still stubbornly holding on to my pants. Who would believe? The usually dignified young master could have such a disheveled side. I said coldly, Glenn, stop humiliating yourself. I don't love you anymore. Stop these meaningless actions. It's really annoying. He seemed like he had lost his soul, murmuring, but I can't let you go, I really can't. I didn't expect Glenn to cry. His eyes red, he spoke almost incoherently. Louise, we've been together for 9 years. 9 years, so many beautiful memories. Are you really willing to throw all of that away? So, he remembered that we had been together for 9 years. When we first got together, Glenn and I were just 18. Back then, Glenn would reject all the girls who showed interest in him for my sake. All his tenderness and indulgence were reserved for me alone. When I stole a kiss from him in the bubble tea shop, he blushed and pushed me away. Behave yourself in public. And then, in private, his kisses left me breathless. Dare to play tricks on me again next time? I was left dizzy from his kisses, but still stubbornly replied, I dare. He smiled helplessly. I really can't deal with you. Back then, when I was sick, Glenn would stay by my bedside all night, coaxing me to take medicine and feeding me. After graduation, when I first got involved in Glenn's family business, he was so busy he barely had time to spare, yet he still remembered every anniversary we had. He would carefully prepare surprises for me, making me happy. We did have many beautiful memories. But he destroyed everything with his own hands. It's precisely because I've seen how deeply he loved me. That's why I couldn't forgive his betrayal. I looked at him indifferently and said without hesitation, Glenn, listen to me, I don't want you anymore. At that moment, the light in Glenn's eyes vanished. A week later, we went to get our divorce certificate. Just as we left the Civil Affairs Bureau, we ran into Claire. She looked expectant, joyfully jumping to Glenn's side. Glenn, congratulations on being single again. Glenn's face turned terribly dark. He pushed Claire's hand away with a stern face and said coldly, I think I made myself clear, I never loved you. Don't ever show up in front of me again, it's impossible between us. Claire looked at him with teary eyes. But Glenn simply ignored her. He hurriedly caught up to me, trying to explain. Louise, I haven't contacted Claire again. I don't know why she showed up. I stopped in my tracks and said calmly, This has nothing to do with me. Glenn, we are already divorced. He forced a bitter smile and said desolately, Yes, you no longer belong to me. After the divorce, life became calm and simple. One day, a month later, I was assigned to host a meeting with a client company's big boss. When I saw that familiar figure, I was slightly surprised. Nick stopped in front of me and smiled lightly. Long time no see. Indeed, it had been a long time. It should have been about 5 years since we graduated. Nick and I were college classmates, in the same department but different majors. Although he may seem aloof, he is extremely handsome and comes from a good family. He was also the president of the student council, with countless fangirls. We weren't very familiar with each other, just acquaintances. I heard that right after graduation, he returned to take over the family business. I smiled and shook hands with him. What a coincidence. He raised an eyebrow slightly. It's not really a coincidence. I didn't quite understand what he meant. He didn't say much more. The collaboration progressed very smoothly. 2 weeks later, at the dinner after signing the contract, a colleague whispered gossip in my ear. Nick, the general manager, is so handsome that it's outrageous. But he's too cold. He glanced at me casually, and I shivered. I was surprised. Really? The colleague sighed. Of course. This kind of male god is the typical type you can only admire from a distance, not play around with. I suppressed a smile. When I turned to look at Nick, I happened to meet his amber eyes. Perhaps his gaze was too focused when looking at me. I suddenly felt at a loss and quickly averted my gaze. Even though I lowered my eyelashes and didn't look at him again, I could still feel his intense gaze lingering on me for a long time. The colleague came over again, whispering in my ear. Why does Nick, the general manager, keep staring at you? How would I know? The colleague sighed. The way he looks at you, it's like he wants to devour you whole. I lightly pinched her. Stop making things up. The colleague fell silent, but her smile was intriguing. After the dinner, as I was hailing a cab on the roadside, Nick's Porsche stopped in front of me. His voice was low. It's not a good time to take a cab, let me drive you back. I pointed at my phone. Thank you, General Manager Nick. But it's all right, I'm waiting for a taxi. He had already gotten out of the car, walked around to the passenger side, and opened the door. You've been standing here for 10 minutes. Get in, I'll drive you. I would have seemed too awkward if I refused again. Thank you. We didn't talk much on the way. After bidding farewell downstairs at my home, I thought he had left. To my surprise, as I went downstairs to throw out the trash, I saw him leaning against the car smoking. In the dim night, his sharp profile softened a bit. When he saw me, he immediately stubbed out the cigarette. Sorry. I found it amusing. Why are you apologizing to me? His eyes darkened slightly. I remember you don't like the smell of smoke. How did he know I didn't like the smell of smoke? He didn't explain, just urged me to go upstairs and rest. Then he drove away. Over the next month, due to work reasons, I had more and more contact with Nick. One day after a project meeting, we went out to dinner together. When we sat down, he gentlemanly pulled out my chair. When ordering, I said anything was fine. He nodded. I'll take care of it then. When the waiter brought the dishes, I realized that all the dishes he ordered were ones I loved. I looked up in surprise. Nick remained composed. What's wrong? Doesn't suit your taste? I shook my head. No, they're all dishes I love. I was just curious how he knew my preferences so well. He smirked. If you like it, eat more. You've lost a lot of weight compared to before. I instinctively touched my cheek. Is my complexion that bad? A few months ago, I had lost my appetite due to Glenn's infidelity, so I had indeed lost some weight. Nick chuckled. Not at all, you're still very beautiful. Just worried you're too thin and might get blown away by the wind. I just realized he was quite witty. I couldn't help but smile. He gazed at me tenderly. It's good to see you smile. You should smile more in the future. I feel like you haven't been as happy as before since I last saw you. I sighed involuntarily. Maybe it's because too much has happened recently. Nick said meaningfully. Misfortune may be a blessing in disguise. I was puzzled. He softly explained. In simple terms, it means when the old goes, the new comes. I was still in a daze. Nick suddenly got up and walked towards the white piano in the center of the restaurant. I had never known Nick played the piano so smoothly. As the song Blessings ended, I clapped until my palms hurt. With a smile playing on his lips, Nick looked at me tenderly. Louise, happy birthday! The waiter brought a mousse cake on a trolley. Louise, happy birthday. This is prepared by Nick for you. I looked in amazement at Nick walking slowly towards me. When I was 7, my parents got divorced. They both remarried and had children separately. For many years after that, no one celebrated my birthday for me. Not until I was 18 and met Glenn. At that time, Glenn promised to spend every birthday with me for the rest of our lives. Unfortunately, he broke that promise too. Lost in my thoughts, I realized Nick was standing in front of me. Surprised, I asked, "How did you know it was my birthday?" "During the campus recruitment before graduation, I happened to see your resume." That was years ago. His memory was quite impressive. He then took out a square gift box and opened it in front of me. Inside the box was a dazzling gemstone necklace. He said, "Happy birthday, Louise. I hope you always shine like this gemstone, sparkling in your own world." For some reason, my eyes suddenly welled up. Honestly, the gemstone was incredibly beautiful. I was grateful for his birthday celebration gesture. But the gift was too precious. I couldn't accept it. However, after rejecting it several times, Nick actually started to act up. "If you don't take it, I'll flush it down the drain." I couldn't help but laugh and cry. "Nick, you're the mighty general manager. Why are you resorting to such tactics?" He pretended to be aggrieved. What does being a general manager have to do with it? Even giving a gift is being rejected. Seeing his helpless and weak appearance, I finally couldn't help but burst into laughter. He laughed along, revealing his bright, neat teeth. In the end, I accepted the gift. In my heart, I planned to go to the mall over the weekend to buy something as a return gift for him. After the meal, Nick drove me home. Unexpectedly, I saw Glenn downstairs at my house. Glenn leaned against the car, smoking pensively. There was still a birthday cake on the hood of the car. In fact, after the divorce, we hadn't seen each other for a long time. When Glenn saw Nick getting out of the car with me, his face suddenly darkened. "Louise, are you with him now?" Obviously, he misunderstood the relationship between Nick and me. Nick calmly said, "I am indeed pursuing her. However, she hasn't agreed to me yet." I was shocked. When did he start pursuing me? I glanced at Nick. He lowered his gaze and glanced at me. Wasn't I obvious enough? Could it be that I was too slow to catch on? Glenn suddenly grabbed my wrist, anxiously saying, "Louise, please don't be with other men, okay?" I coldly pulled my hand back. "Glenn, we are already divorced. You have no right to interfere with who I befriend." Glenn's eyes dimmed, and he asked me meekly, "Can't you give me another chance?" Nick chuckled lightly, full of mockery. "Glenn, when you cheated, didn't you think this day would come? You broke Louise's heart, how dare you ask for her forgiveness?" Glenn's eyes were filled with anger. "I'm talking to my wife, do you have to butt in?" Nick smirked. "Glenn, watch your words, it's ex-wife." Glenn's anger flared up even more, raising his fist to strike at Nick. Nick took a solid punch. He touched the blood oozing from his mouth and retaliated. Seeing the conflict escalating, I opened my arms and stood in front of Nick. "Glenn, please don't lose control." Glenn looked at me in disbelief. "Louise, how can you defend another man in front of me?" It seemed like he had forgotten again that we were already divorced. I reiterated for the last time. "Glenn, I can't go back. If you truly cherish those past 9 years, please stop bothering me. Your persistence only makes me more disgusted with you. If it happens again, I will call the police." Glenn's face turned incredibly pale, his eyes filled with deep sorrow. His lips moved with difficulty. In the end, he didn't say anything. He staggered away. The scar on Nick's mouth seemed more pronounced. I pondered and said, "Should we go upstairs so I can help you with that wound?" He shook his head. "No need, it's too late. It wouldn't be good for your reputation if it got out. I'll go back and apply some antiseptic myself." It seemed like he was always considering me. A thought crossed my mind. Suddenly, he asked me, "Louise, can you reconsider our relationship?" I was taken aback. He explained softly, "I'm not asking you to be my girlfriend right now. I just hope that in the future, you won't treat me only as an old classmate or a client. I hope you can simply see me as a man who admires you." I remembered what he had just said about pursuing me. "So, does he really like me?" He raised an eyebrow slightly. "Why do you think I chose the company you work for out of so many bidding companies? This project, neither big nor small, doesn't require my personal presence. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't have stayed in H-City." I couldn't understand why. He was so outstanding, admired by countless women. He smiled faintly. I remember in the second semester of our junior year, the school organized an outing. That day, we coincidentally ran into a group of elementary school kids flying kites. One little girl accidentally got her kite stuck in a tree. She was crying loudly. You touched her hair and told her not to be sad. Then, you climbed the tree and got her kite down for her. In my memory, you always seemed gentle and fragile. Who would have thought you were so agile? It seemed like from that day on, I couldn't help but want to pay attention to you. But at that time, you were already with Glenn. I could tell that you truly loved him back then. I didn't want to meddle in others' relationships, and I didn't have the confidence to replace him in your heart. Louise, if Glenn hadn't let you down, I probably wouldn't have told you any of this in my lifetime. Unbeknownst to me, Nick had silently liked me for so long. What surprised me even more was when Nick's assistant, Wyatt, privately told me that Nick's nickname on Weibo was Wait. I was stunned. Wyatt chuckled. "Looks like you've figured it out." I didn't have many followers on Weibo. Except for the zombie followers the platform provided. There were only a few active followers. Among them was a follower named Wait, who had been following me for 6 years. They would like almost every post of mine, but never left a comment. Their profile showed their gender as female. So, I always thought it was a girl. It turned out to be Nick. No wonder he knew my preferences so well. Every detail I shared on Weibo, he remembered. Wyatt sincerely said, "Louise, Nick's feelings for you are absolutely genuine. When you were happy, he never thought of disturbing you. It's only now that he sees you're single again that he wants to try for his chance." Finally, Wyatt joked again, saying, "Louise, men like our general manager, who are handsome, rich, and faithful, are hard to come by. If you miss this opportunity, you'll regret it for a lifetime. Nick is indeed very good. Everyone says he is aloof and indifferent, looking down on everything. But in the 2 months we spent together, he has always been gentle, polite, and considerate towards me. He would walk me home when it got dark, hold an umbrella for me when it rained, and put a coat on me when it was chilly. Sometimes when I was upset, he would patiently comfort and advise me. When I faced difficulties at work, he would try his best to help me solve them. He is undoubtedly a rare good man in this world. I ask myself, do I like him? I don't know. The only thing I can be sure of is that I do not reject his closeness. Nick is, after all, the general manager. There are still many matters at the company headquarters that require his attention. So, in the 4th month in H City, he was forcibly called back to the company headquarters by his father. On the 15th day after Nick left, I finished work and was waiting for a taxi by the roadside, feeling suddenly empty inside. I remembered one night when he drove me home. I fell asleep in the car because I was too tired. When I woke up, his Porsche had been parked downstairs at my home for 2 hours. His suit was still draped over me. I thanked him and apologized again. I'm sorry for making you wait. But he naturally took the blame upon himself. It's my fault, I couldn't bear to wake you up since you looked so peaceful sleeping. He was so considerate like that. He never gave me any pressure or burden. I was surprised to find myself starting to miss him. After returning home, I lay in bed tossing and turning, unable to sleep. I took out my phone and opened our WeChat conversation. The chat logs were still from the day before yesterday. It seems he is really busy since he went back. A sense of loss spread from the depths of my heart. I wanted to open his moments to take a look. I accidentally double-clicked on his profile picture. I tapped my forehead with my finger. Louise, are you silly? Regretfully, I closed my phone. Not even half a minute passed, and my WeChat pinged twice. I opened it to see a message from Nick. It's already midnight, why aren't you resting yet? I pouted and typed back. I can't sleep. He replied quickly. What's wrong? Something on your mind? After some thought, I cautiously asked. Will you come back? After clicking send, I immediately regretted it. Frantically, I tried to recall the message. But he had already seen it. If you want to see me. I stared at the screen, feeling my heartbeat quicken. After taking a few deep breaths, I finally typed a single word seriously. Yes. He replied with just one word. Okay. I held onto my phone and unknowingly fell asleep. The next morning, the doorbell kept ringing. I groggily went to open the door. When I saw Nick through the peephole, my jaw almost dropped to the floor in shock. I suddenly woke up. Quickly washed my face, combed my hair, then ran back to the living room to open the door. Both shocked and delighted, I asked. Why did you suddenly come back? He smiled gently. Because someone said they wanted to see me. A rush of heat flooded my cheeks, making me feel a bit uncomfortable as I averted my gaze. Suddenly, he reached out and lightly ruffled my hair. The gesture was affectionate, yet natural. With a smile in his voice, he asked me, Why are you blushing? Well, now my ears turned red too. His laughter became more unrestrained. I glared at him awkwardly. Don't make fun of me. He immediately raised his hands in surrender. Okay, I won't tease you anymore. I wonder if I could borrow your couch for a while. I was busy until now last night, and I was still handling work on the plane. I haven't slept a wink. My heart squeezed a bit, and I apologized with regret. I'm sorry, I didn't know you were so busy. I've wasted your time again. He gently patted the top of my head. Silly, it's me who wanted to see you, don't blame yourself. Looking at his gentle eyes and brows, a warm feeling rushed through my heart. I stepped aside to let him in. He must have been really tired because he fell asleep as soon as he lay down. Considering how he didn't even rest and rushed over to see me, I decided to personally make him lunch as a thank you. But my cooking skills were really bad. The burnt smell of the food woke him up directly. He looked at the messy kitchen and chuckled. "Louise, are you trying to demolish the house?" I was embarrassed to the core. He laughed and pushed me out of the kitchen. "Be good, go play, I'll take care of it." I skeptically asked. "Can you handle it?" He lightly pinched my nose. "Louise, please mind your words." I belatedly realized how easily that sentence could be misunderstood. I blushed instantly. His smile deepened a bit more. I never expected Nick to be such a good cook. I enjoyed the meal thoroughly and managed to hold back from giving a thumbs up. He gazed at me gently. "Can I have the chance to make lunch for you for the rest of my life?" His sudden confession made me blush uncontrollably. He smiled again. "How come I never noticed before how easily you blush?" I huffed lightly. "Well, I never noticed before how much you like teasing me either." He took a few steps towards me, speaking firmly. "I'm not teasing you. Every word comes from my heart. Louise, I love you. I want to take care of you for the rest of my life. I want to make you happy every day. All those troublesome things, let me handle them. Please give me a chance to prove my sincerity to you." His words were so sincere and heartfelt. I couldn't possibly refuse. And I didn't want to refuse. Blushing, I nodded. He reached out and embraced me. His hug was tight. My ear pressed against his chest. I could hear the irregular rhythm of his heartbeat. Unable to resist teasing him, I said, "Nick, your heartbeat is a bit fast, huh?" His voice was deep and magnetic. "Yes, my heart beats only for you." This might just be the most beautiful love confession in the world.